Okay, greetings and welcome to Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 11th of February 2024, and I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu in the studio with Sister Oleander for a review of community-related news over the past 2 weeks. As ever, you can watch us live, and if you are, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And as we always like to ask, if you can hear us and see us okay, please give us a heads up, send us a message, a tweet, whatever those things you think to call. Sister Oleander is monitoring the chat and just let us know that you can hear and see us okay. That will be very helpful. And also don't forget to subscribe. If you're not a subscriber already, you can like and share this broadcast if you find it useful. Yeah, I think that's about it with the openings, and I'm gonna get on with the program, quite a jam-packed program. And as usual, we're going to start with libations to those that have recently passed and any notable anniversaries. So the first we remember is to our sister, the elder Audrey Adams. Now, Audrey Adams was the mother of Roland Adams. He was a young teenager who was murdered by racists in Thamesmead in February 1991. Now, the horrific story was that he'd been walking towards a bus stop after spending the evening playing table tennis at a local youth club when he was attacked and fatally stabbed by a gang of 15 European youths. We're quite familiar with this kind of like gang lynching mentality, especially in the 1990s. Now, only one man was ever convicted for Roland's murder, and there was also an attack at the same time on his younger brother, Nathan, who managed to escape with his life. Now, the person who was charged and convicted was Mark Thornborough. He was jailed for a maximum of 10 years. 4 others were given community services for violent disorder. Now, reason why it's important to remember our sister Roland Adams is because she set up the Roland Adams Family Campaign to fight for justice and extend support to other victims of racist violence. And we know that there would be many more because 2 years after the murder of Roland Adams in April 1993, we were afflicted with the murder of Stephen Lawrence, who died in, or I say died, who was murdered in Eltham in similar circumstances. I should also was one of those community groups that was also spied upon by the Metropolitan Police's Special Demonstration Squad. So even during trauma, even in grief, the family was being harassed and blighted by racism. So Audrey Adams, we remember. The next libation goes to Aston Barrett. He was the famous Jamaican bassist known as Family Man, who served as the rhythmic architect for legends like Bob Marley and, of course, the Wailers, Burning Spear, Peter Tosh, Augustus Pablo. And he joined the Ancestors at the age of 77. He's survived by, and this is not a mistake, he was survived by 50 children, hence, I guess, the title of Family Man. In 2012, he achieved a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Bass Player magazine. In fact, one of the things he once said, which I really like as a musician, he said that the drum, when we talk about music, is the heartbeat, but the bass is the backbone. And we often, the drum is often, it's the thing that keeps us, the rhythm going. But the bass gives us that vibe. It gives us, it's the two of them together that makes it work. And so he was an amazing bassist. Bob Marley's son, Ziggy Marley, wrote, "My teacher is gone. Aston Family Man Barrett, his feel and style has inspired me and so many others. We will continue to study his genius for generations and miss his physical presence. Still, his spiritual energy and teachings endure. Love to the Barrett family." And I extend that as well. And while there's a screening of the film, which is a tribute to the legend Bob Marley, let's not forget the many people around him who helped make that legend possible, that made those rhythmic like tracks, those genius tracks come to life. Aston Barrett, Family Man, we remember. Now, the next libation goes to an actor whose credits you probably know from the image. Go, they begin. I say they don't begin; they were before Rocky, but Rocky is the most famous, and Predator, if you like a sci-fi like I do. This is to Carl Weathers, who joined the Ancestors at the age of 76. Um, his family released a statement for his agent to announce that he passed away peacefully in his sleep at the beginning of February. There's not much to say other than, what more can you say about someone whose, performance in the first Rocky film as Apollo Creed kind of like inspired the world. In fact, it made him world famous. The character he played was loosely inspired by the real life champion and role model to many, Muhammad Ali, including myself. Yeah, Carl Weathers, thank you. And we remember. And the last libation is someone within my own family, so not many people will know outside of my family circles and those in Nigeria, which is to my uncle, Otumba Adishiga, or Uncle Adishiga to ourselves. He was my favorite uncle. He recently passed away. He lived a good life. There's not much I can say, which will, other than that, he was amazing as a nephew, and having him coming and spending time with us when we was living in London, and my father was still with us. He was that link between the motherland and my father living in diaspora. The little German I know, the language I learned from him because he has businesses in Germany as well as in Nigeria and London, so he used to travel amongst them. And it shook me quite a bit, actually, to find out he passed. But he did 20 Ancestors at the age of 82, which is, as they say, is good innings. So I extend his condolences to his wife, his amazing wife who looked after us well when we was in Nigeria, and the whole family. I know the funeral's taking place on the 20th of this month. Uncle Adishiga, Otumba Edward Adishiga, we remember. And that was the last of the libations for this week. Just a reminder, you're watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Thank you for the heads up. I know that some of you have already given us a check. Much appreciated. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. Now, the next section, UK News, looks at domestic politics affecting our community. Now, the first story is that of Victor Iroghu, I hope I pronounced correctly, who was forced to sleep on streets after what has been described as cruel Home Office visa delays. Now, our brother Victor, who was 41, was a former TfL worker, and he's revealed that he is, or is, I should say, did I say was, I should say is, a former TfL worker. He's been facing deportation and has been forced to sleep on the streets of London, and sometimes in sub-zero temperatures. And this has occurred after the Home Office ignored his fee waiver request for his visa applications. Now, for those of you who don't know, actually what happens is that if you want to stay longer and you want to extend your visa, the government gives you these ridiculously high fees and bureaucracy you've got to jump through. Now, our brother Victor has been fighting to remain in the UK after his visa expired, but he was unable to afford the cost of applying for an extension. He actually moved to the UK from Nigeria in 2007 to pursue studies, and he gained a limited leave to remain visa on a 10-year route to indefinite leave to remain. However, as I've just suggested and said, since 2022, he's been unable to afford the fee, which is now more than £4,000. He is, as I said, he's homeless, and he's been classed as an overstayer by the government. We'll talk more about the wickedness that people been forced to sleep on the streets because of bureaucracy in this country and anti-immigrant hysteria. But yeah, that's just a story that's come over the last couple of weeks. The next story is an update on one that we shared with you, I think it's around a month ago. And this is the horrific story of Peter Norgrove. Now, Peter Norgrove is the 43-year-old builder who bludgeoned the mother, Sharon Gordon, to death with a hammer, leaving her screaming and shouting as he did so at her home in Dudley. Now, this was caught on the Ring, one of those security cameras, not the footage but the audio. So that, it's clear he did it. He admits to it. What's quite chilling, because the case has been taking place now, was that hours after his savage killing, the so-called family man led a Jehovah's Witness service at the same place of worship that our sister Sharon Gordon, who was 59, would go to. Now, like I said, the footage captured the murder, but the reason why the Ring was actually the Ring camera was installed in the first place was because she had employed him to do some building work, and he was a skiving. He would arrive late to work. He would sit in his car for an hour on his phone outside the house, and he'd even fail to work full days. And that's why she recorded. She bought the camera. It recorded him doing this. She paid him more than £25,000 in installments of £5,000. He repeatedly lied to her about the work that he was doing, which took some 15 months instead of 6 weeks. And just having the audacity to complain, as far as he was concerned, was enough for him to murder her. Now, the judge has jailed him for life, but he's going to serve a minimum of 15 years. There are many of us who feel that's very, very lenient, because this was a deliberate murder. Doesn't matter that he's acknowledged it. He's acknowledged it because there's footage of it, so he can't escape it. The fact that he went to church straight afterward and led a service immediately tells me that there's a level of callousness and lack of remorse. I don't really like to use the word evil, in fact, but this is what's taking place. So anyway, the good thing is that he has been convicted, but life is not life. It's like I said, 15 years minimum. I have read that there are some who are advocating to write to the Attorney General asking to review the sentencing, and that's a good action to take place. That's a good thing to do. I'm going to move on. And the next story is one about the chief executive of the brewery giant, Greene King. Now, for those of you who don't know, this brewery giant has responded to reports that St. Kitts and Nevis are demanding reparations for African enslavement after the organization admitted in 2020 to its historical links to Ma'afa. Now, Benjamin Greene, who started the company in 1799, is responsible for enslaving 231 Africans in St. Kitts. And Nick Mackenzie, the man you see in the picture, who's the company's chief executive at the time, said it's inexcusable that one of our founders profited from slavery and argued against its abolition in the 1800s. They say that in 2020, we took the decisive action, publishing an action plan for how we can play our part in calling time on racism. And the whole group has vowed to become a truly anti-racist organization. It's really important just to understand when people say that, and organizations say that actually being an anti-racist organization isn't a gift to African people to make amends for enslavement and colonization. You're supposed to be an anti-racist organization. You're supposed to be your default position. That's not gifting us anything, which is why that doesn't really classify as reparations. The revenue, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, for the pub operator, which has over 2,000 sites across the UK, topped 2 billion last year. So they make some serious change. They made at least just under £200 million in pure profit. So, vowing to have an action plan which makes them a truly anti-racist organization isn't quite enough. There needs to be another step that goes further if you truly are going to engage in reparative justice and activities. Did I just miss Sister Oleander? Sister Oleander.
Yes, I've got 2 comments I'd like to share. The first one is from FP Comms. Greetings and blessings to you and all you love. You sound well and lively today. That's the first one.
Give thanks and greetings to you too.
And the second one is from Keith Hall saying that man is evil. He's not talking about the Green King man. He's talking about that killer. I don't even want to say his name personally, but yeah.
That is evil. Yeah. And yeah, I completely agree with you. That is just pure evilness. 15 years isn't enough. But thank you. Okay. Just as a reminder, you are watching the Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. You too can join in the discussion. You're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And Sister Oleander is watching and waiting, and we can have a discussion. You can ask questions and make comments. That's fine as well. Or just say hi. That's cool as well. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, like, share if you find this broadcast useful. Each one teach one. We like to spread it. As an organization, we don't go around promoting this channel. We hope everyone else who finds it useful shares it with other people. Now, again, this is another section talking about politics, but this is, this is over the news that's taken place over the last couple of weeks. And, I think you'll find these stories interesting. So the first one, it's quite a complex one. I'll try and break it down without getting too nerdy on you. This is the Windrush charity, which has been ordered to pay almost £4,000 to the British government in costs over a trademark dispute. Now, just to give you an understanding of what's going on here, now the Windrush Foundation, which is the co-founder and director, who is Arthur Torrington, has said that he strongly opposes, or the charity strongly opposes, the government's approach to recognizing African Caribbean people. And he's made this application in an attempt to prevent the government spreading what is considered to be the wrong message. Now, many Windrush-related charities that are led by African people, and Arthur Torrington, without a doubt, has been consistently, kind of like championing, promoting African and African Caribbean people and the heritage and the Windrush cause. Without doubt, many of us have said that actually the Windrush label is being misapplied and used as propaganda. So what Arthur attempted to do, from what I can read in the judgment and the application, that he tried to trademark the terms Windrush, and to prevent more, because I don't know if you know, the government has a Windrush Day as well now, and they have all these different Windrush related things. They use it as a way just to beat us over the head and to marginalize and minimize the presence of Africans from other islands in the Caribbean and across the continent. It's as if no one else other than those who arrived on the boat existed in the UK beforehand or afterwards. And so what happened was that he put the trademark in, and then the government took the extraordinary step of accusing the Windrush Foundation of applying for the trademarks in bad faith and without an intention to use marks in respect of the services claim. So they pushed back really hard, and they said that the word Windrush pertains to the HMT, which is a full name, Empire Windrush, which is correct, and therefore, the charity doesn't have a claim to it, and so it can't do that. The government also said that the Windrush Foundation's opposition to the Windrush Monument that's been erected in Waterloo Station is indicative of its attempt to disrupt its activities, and it's a pattern of filing intended to disrupt not just their other activities, but also the monument and the use of the Windrush and any other kind of terms. If you look at the image that's on the screen there, you'll see the Windrush monument that's at Waterloo. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with it or the history behind it, it was produced by a Jamaican artist called Basil Watson, but there's a lot of controversy over its kitsch look. When I say kitsch, I'm talking about it's kind of like a banal kind of stereotypical glamification of Africans who came on the Windrush, kind of divorced from any of the political context from there. It also didn't have the support of the African community doing it. There was already Monument 2007, kind of like being mooted to go forward. There's a lot of politics behind there, but the government went ahead anyway, and it brought on a lot of people to kind of like launched there. And if you see the footage of the launch, and I suggest that you actually do go and watch the footage of the launch that took place at Waterloo Station and take a look to see who's not there. And if you see who's not there and you see who is there, then that will tell you how much support it did not have from the community. It was not a grassroots event, and it had no place being placed in Waterloo Station. And so this is a very complex story. And the other image I put there, just as a reminder of how things can be done correctly, is the monument that's outside, near the BCA, which is to those of us. This has been put up basically by Brother Nubian Jack, and that's a monument that's backed by the community. It's it's in Brixton. It's to those of us who fought and who are not commemorated when government does its Armistice Day. So I'm just trying to, we haven't got time to. It's probably a lecture for me to explain the difference between the two monuments and how one is reaffirming the status quo and one is actually doing the right thing and honoring those who lost their lives. But the case and the news story is that the government is now demanding, or the courts are demanding, £4,000 from the Windrush Foundation for trying to protect the honour of those who are often smeared and stereotyped with that label. Tell you it's a bit complicated.
Okay, yes, I have two comments. First one from Keith Hall. Tell the government to deduct that 3,800 after interest and monies owed to those Windrush generations.
Good suggestion. If anyone's listening, any minister, take that on board.
Yep. And the second comment is from Del Smith.
Greetings.
What a wicked man. The man supposed to be a man of God goes to show the devil goes to church too. Sad the sister had no brothers or men friends to protect her.
Yeah, I mean, to pay £25,000 to do work in your home, and for it to take months when it was supposed to be taking a week, and then the man still evil-minded that he took her life in that way. Yeah, evil is the right. I don't like using the word like evil, but unfortunately, there are some acts that are so heinous. I don't know what other word is strong enough to do it. And then again, like you said, to go to church. But I'm going to move on with the story. And thank you. It's good to have you with us this week.
Sorry, there's one more just come in from Keith saying many Windrush people have died before any payments owed.
Yes, that's a very good point, and they continue to do so. There has been a pushback since the Horizon scandal, which is the IT problem that took place with Fujitsu in the post office. There was a campaign we spoke about in the last program about not forgetting Windrush. I forgot what the campaign was called, and it's highlighting some of these issues. But the truth of the matter is, because those who are affected by the so-called Windrush scandal are of African heritage, there's no urgency from the government to deal with it, and so we are losing family members without any reparations being made. And so that baton has to pass on. This is something else we had to pass on. This job has to happen. We cannot forget. I'm going to move on to the next story, which is it's a piece of research that's recently been shared, and it's there was a what do you call them? One of those panels. I've forgotten what they call them. The government select commons, that kind of thing. Essentially, what's happened is that the MP Kim Johnson has revealed that people have been sent to jail or sent to prison for crimes they did not commit, and this is actually costing the public over £250 million each year, and that's because that money has been spent on prosecuting and processing the cases of defendants in cases of joint enterprise. Trying to unpack this a little bit more, for those of you who are unfamiliar, joint enterprise is the legal doctrine which has seen thousands of innocent people go to jail for life for allegedly assisting or encouraging another to commit murder. So it doesn't. So even if you haven't committed the murder, apparently, if you're aware of the murder or you're aware someone was about to do it, Joint enterprise has meant that your just association, someone sending you a tweet or a text message could see you go to jail. It's crazy. Okay. But what happens is that when the police investigate people and they start looking through, and of course it's been disproportionately affected African people, that goes without saying. So every time the police bring up someone else to charge, and they become a defendant, the cost of defending each individual, I think, was around £1.3 million. So a lot of people are eating off this. Okay, £1.3 million per defendant is around that 1.2, £1.3 million. And so the research has shown, like I said, £250 million each year. That's £250 million is spent on just processing defendants in these cases. It doesn't talk about if they're imprisoned, how much it costs to incarcerate. It doesn't talk about the unjust and the moral unjustness of actually putting someone who's innocent in jail. I mean, it's all those kind of issues. So it's really good that this MP, Kim Johnson, I think she's from Liverpool, told her colleagues in the Commons that something has gone profoundly wrong. And it's really important that we recognise that. Now, in 2016, the Supreme Court ruled that this aspect of joint enterprise had been misapplied, which meant people could no longer be prosecuted for the possibility of foreseeing a crime, but only if they intended to assist in committing it. So there has been recognition and slight moves forward to try and reduce the severity, the way it was being used as a scattergun just to criminalise innocent young African people. But I don't think that that's resolved itself yet. What's the name of the campaign? It's the Jenga campaign. The Jenga campaign, which is actually a group of families, children, young people who have been, and adults who have been wrongly convicted, are pushing and trying to overturn their convictions. The next story is one that came out, I think it was the the Voice newspaper that kind of like covered this. There's been quite a lot of interest in, what is Labour Party going to do for us? And there's a front page cover, and basically our brother, kind of Andrews, has actually come up with a statement that Keir Starmer doesn't care about us, essentially. It kind of reminds me of Kanye West when he was actually interested in talking about the plight of African Americans and not pandering to the orange one in the White House. So this story that's been published is a mixture of African MPs, campaigners, all claiming that the level of uncertainty around the Labour Party's pledge to introduce a Race Equality Act raises serious questions about its commitment to potential voters, and that's us, essentially. And you've got to remember that, Keir Starmer said this in 2020, that they were going to do something, but nothing's happened. It was 4 years later on. There's no draft paper or anything. I think there was kind of like squirmy noise like last week that there was going to be some kind of like press launch or some kind of like, some conference on race. But this was apparently scaled back because they feared that protesters would disrupt the event, because of course their stance on Palestine has been atrocious. So that's the position right now. No one even knows if the conference took place. I mean, that's how bad it is, right? So, there has been no launch. Did the conference take place? Who knows? It just shows how important it is to the Labour Party. I should make a comment that our brother kind of Andrews is going to be at Hackney Central Library on Thursday, the 29th of February, and he's going to be talking about his book, The Psychosis of Whiteness. So again, I'm going to come back to this topic about political allegiance and literacy later on in the end of the program.
Yes, we have another comment from KB saying, "Greetings, Legali. Continue with the good works."
Thank you, KB, and greetings to you as well. We'll keep doing our best. Now, you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. I said it before, you're welcome to interact with us as everyone else has been doing. Please feel free. Don't forget to subscribe. If you haven't liked us already, hit like, hit share if you can, if you find this broadcast useful. We're just going over the news of things that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. And this section is looking at Afrophobia and white supremacy, because we tend to be told that it doesn't exist anymore, right? But we know better. Okay, and so the first story actually moves outside the UK. Most of the stories, as you know, come from a UK perspective, but sometimes we just feel like, we're a Pan-African organisation, you need to know what's going on everywhere else. So just as a heads up on this particular topic, in Brazil, they're facing and having discussions around the issues of reparations. And this is quite groundbreaking in many ways because Brazil has this awful legacy when it comes to Ma'afa. They were the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery. They did it in 1888. And we're not even going to talk about kind of like the legend that was Zumbi and how bad Brazil was. We also know that Brazil has more Africans who are kidnapped into forced labor than any other nation, more so than anyone anywhere in the Americas and the Caribbean, and most Africans landed in Brazil. So it's quite revolutionary news, or I don't say revolutionary, I believe the misapplied. It's quite significant news that at the Portelo Samba School in Rio de Janeiro, that Andre Mercado, the executive manager for the Brazilian State Bank, said that today's Bank of Brazil asks for forgiveness. And the bank is now recognizing that it has blood on its hand. Now, if you imagine and consider that Brazil is a nation where more than half the population self-identifies as Africans or dual heritage, but has still long resisted dealing with this history of Ma'afa. This is quite a revelation. Now, it's not enough, of course, asking for forgiveness. The bank saying that is not enough. It stops short of talking about reparations. And grassroots community in Brazil, Gailene Almeida Acuna, who's a spiritual leader of the African Brazilian religion Umbanda, welcomed the apology and the announcement of measures. But she's recognised that, look, the bank stopped short of pledging reparations, and I came to say that if you're going to talk this on Poleta's Sacred Soul, then yes, you need to recognise that we do want reparations made. So it's an interesting story, and I thought I'd start with that. I know it's not UK based, but of course we're a Pan-African organisation, and all these stories have relevance to us. We need to be aware of what's taking place around the world. That's Oleander.
Yes. So 2 very short greetings from Mr. IC3, Black Reparation Nation, sends his greetings.
Greetings, Mr. IC Black.
Yep, and English gal. That makes me laugh every time. 234, greetings.
Greetings, English gal. Good to have you all with us as well. And I should also have that my son actually is currently in Brazil at the moment.
Yes, he is.
So I hope you're doing well, son, and taking care. Can't wait to hear of your journey when you get back. Okay, next story. We talked about evil. Oh gosh. Okay, so this is another story. I'm going to talk about white supremacy. Now, this man that you see on the screen, his name is Danny Staley, and he was jailed for committing a racist knife point attack on neighbors Alexander Baptist and Jennifer Bryan. And this took place, I think, a year or 2 ago. But what happened was that when he was released from prison, he returned to the area, got involved in an argument with Baptist, that's Alexander Baptist. Unfortunately, our brother had taken an axe with him and had it in his belt. And so Staley got the axe and overpowered and took the axe from him. And he butchered him. They were neighbors. He slashed open his ear, his left temple, his forehead, his shoulder, his scalp. He broke his eye socket, his left elbow, and 2 ribs. It's a messy case. It was a racist attack. It was neighbors. I don't censor. I don't do wrong and strong. So the first thing is that this was an evil attack. This was a racist attack. I won't say it wasn't. It was justified. Obviously, clearly, it wasn't. It was a complicated chain of events. And so I'm going to tell you, not because I'm excusing what he did, but just so you have full context in case anyone wants to talk about this. So Staley, this evil man here, has stress-induced seizures, and he'd previously complained about his neighbours' noise and what he called their chaotic lifestyle, because our brother and sister with him were engaged in serious drug taking, and they made a lot of noise and stuff. And so he didn't like them making noise after a certain hour. They slammed the door one night after 10 p.m., and that's what triggered him off into a rage. So that doesn't excuse what he did. And the same way when he came out of jail, him getting into argument with the brother doesn't excuse the brother coming out of the street with an axe and putting it into his belt. That was just stupid. But what he did in return was unconscionable. Our brother Alexander Baptist needed surgery for the wounds. Fortunately, he did not die. But what we also know, he was very uncooperative in the police investigation, which led to Staley's arrest 12 days later. I can understand why he's uncooperative in many ways, because if someone is your neighbor, and he's doing this sort of harm, and we don't believe the police is going to protect us, there's many reasons why people don't cooperate. The good news was that he was jailed again, but only for 2 years and 3 months. He's been given one of those, what do you call them, those orders when you're not allowed to go around people. He's been given one of those orders, injunctions, I think it is. He's not allowed to go anywhere near where they live. He can't live in the same place and anything like that. It's a horrific story. I just thought I had to share it with you. None of what I've said justifies, obviously, what he did. I just share that because the way we work at Legali is that we give you all the facts so you understand. I'm going to move on because that one makes me sick to the stomach. The next story is one that, unfortunately, you'll probably won't be surprised to hear, is that there's been an increase of exclusion of African Caribbean girls in schools over the last year. There's been tripled, actually. In fact, the only girls with worse outcomes from any community are those from the traveller community. Yeah, what can I say? This issue has been investigated by a group called the Agenda Alliance, and that's like a collaboration of around 120 charities and frontline organisations trying to do some good work. The government doing its usual nonsense of saying that schools cannot discriminate against people on the basis of their race. Obviously, that's their language, not mine, under any circumstances, and that they also back school heads to use suspensions and permanent exclusions where required. And so, they don't care. That's basically what the government's saying. They're saying that it's not happening because of their ethnic background, and when it does happen, yeah, we back the heads under any circumstances. But the truth of the matter is, we're seeing this almost tripling of exclusions of girls with African Caribbean heritage, and it is specifically African Caribbean heritage where this tripling is taking place. It's double the rate of those of your European girls. Oh God, yeah. Okay, so this section is white supremacy. This does my head in sometimes. Okay, I don't really like promoting these kind of things, but this is news. So there's this racist, right, Nathan Koffnaz, as you can see on the screen. And he's now based at Harvard University, and he's argued in favor of the preservation of what they call racial distinctions and for support for race realism, or what we call scientific racism or pseudoscience. Now, this clown confess claims that in a meritocracy, so-called blacks, obviously his language, not mine, would disappear from almost all profile positions outside of sports and entertainment. And if that sounds racist to you, that's because it is. When he talks about the preservation of racial distinctions, if that sounds like the sterilization of people on the basis of their ethnic background, and that sounds like eugenics, that's because it is eugenics. So normally we wouldn't cover something like this because racist does racist things, right? The problem was that this guy was hired, Confess was hired by the university in 2022 after making these comments and claiming that there was intelligence differences among so-called racial groups in 2019. I've heard he's also now a fellow at Cambridge University. So there are students, of course, calling for him to be sacked as protests against him, etc. And and this is all there. But the problem is that he achieved I think it's ECR funding. He's a fellow at Cambridge. He's hired as a fellow at Harvard, and they know that he's racist. They know he's a white supremacist. They know that he's got these Afrophobic, ideas that he wants to promote. And it's difficult for me, who believes in academic freedom, for someone like myself who says that we should be free to discuss difficult ideas, and I do believe we should do. But there comes a point when someone goes beyond what they call the pale. They go beyond what is clearly logic, and you start to move into this distasteful, it's even beyond offensive, this dehumanizing rhetoric. And of course, the Mail writes this, but they write it because they know a lot of their readers actually believe it. And so I thought, if I'm going to talk about Nathan Kofnas, then I just want us to think of it from a slightly different perspective. I want you to think about the perspective that Nathan Kofnas is saying something slightly different. That he's claiming that in a meritocracy, that Jewish people would disappear from almost all high-profile positions outside of sports and entertainment, or banking and jewelry, for example. I would want you to argue that, to consider that Nathan Kofnas argued that Jewish people should not exist, to make sure that the preservation of racial distinctions was unable to happen. Now, if Nathan Kofnas said such outrageous anti-Semitic statements such as this, would Harvard, Cambridge, and I think it is the ESRC who gave him the funding, I'm not 100% sure, but it's one of those groups, would they still be in support of this character? Would he still have his appointments? Would he still have his jobs? I think we know the answer to that. So the question that we should be answered is, why then can someone make such Afrophobic statements? And I'm very specific when I say Afrophobic. I didn't say anti-racist or racist statements. Why did he make such Afrophobic statements which are dehumanizing? Why is he able to still have a post and have an appointment and affiliations with Harvard and Cambridge? That's the question that we need to ask. That's the thing that we need to think about. Racist says racist thing is not a story. That's always going to happen. What the problem is that these institutions are propping him up. They're almost validating his statements, not for academic discussion, not because they have any merit, but simply because they don't see the attack, they don't see Afrophobia as something worthy of defending or something that is a problem in society. I'm going to leave that there. I just wanted to tease it that way and put it out that way. Sister Oleander.
Yes, 2 comments. First one from Keith Hall. People like Nathan always amaze me that in today's modern world get in a position of influence.
Yeah.
And the second one is from Keith also. The Daily Fail. What do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, racist going to be a racist. They're going to do what they do. But the issue is that these people get into position of influence. They're not the problem. It's the people who put them in those positions, that give them the influence, that lend credence to their Afrophobic ideas, that are the problem. And no, in this particular case, it's Harvard University and Cambridge University. And that's where the problem lies, if they're actually happy to be affiliated with someone like this. Okay, let me move on to the next. Is there another one? Sister Oleander, I think you're muted, Sister Oleander.
Sorry about that. FP.com says, I just read something similar today in The Spectator today. I think it's also important to check if they are selling a book or promoting a specific product.
You know what? That's a really good point. I didn't know about The Spectator, but it perhaps this is why I didn't really want to talk about him as an individual so much. But actually, one of the things is that if there is a book, then, what would Legally have done? We would have written to the publisher and we would have put pressure on them to drop it. I mean, there's other things we can do. Sometimes rather than going on Twitter, they'll go after the individual, and that's all very exciting, all very fun, but that doesn't change anything. The way things work is that you go after the institutions, you go after the policies, you go after the infrastructure that kind of enables us to go through. So if there is a publication, I remember, what was that campaign where people started getting advertisers to pull their funding? There's lots of different things that could be done, but we had to highlight this. I'm going to move on, and thank you for sharing that. It's a really good point.
Lastly, FPCom says there's usually a commercial proposition to this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're definitely right on that. Thank you. Okay, so the next story, unfortunately, it does deal with the issue of racism or Afrophobia. This time, it's highlighting the impact of racism in the mental health sector, and it's come about by a new report from the Charity Centre for Mental Health, which has said that racism doesn't just cause psychological trauma, but the discrimination itself also slows the rate of recovery within the services. Now, this is really important thing to think about. We often, and this is linked to the last story, when we hear it, articles and news stories about racism, we often think about the psychological trauma, the harm it causes emotional to the individual. But of course, that's more than that. Because if you're trying to heal, if you're trying to recover, and you're facing discrimination within a service that's riddled with racism, then not only are you being harmed and your well-being harmed on a psychological level, but also on a physical level, because you don't have a clear path to recovery. And in those racism, those policies and those ideas filter into practices. So, for example, I know it's a tired statistic, but it's worth remembering that African people are 4 times more likely to be sectioned than their European counterparts. They're 11 times more likely to require community treatment orders, which means that they receive supervised treatment in the community than their European counterparts. So, I mean, this is not just affecting them psychologically or us psychologically. It's affecting us, when we're trying to heal, and the treatments, the therapies, and the effectiveness of those therapies. Now, Professor Habib Nakif, that's the person you can see in the image. He's the chief executive of the NHS Race and Health Observatory. He says, we also know that African and Caribbean communities in particular face barriers in accessing specific mental health services. They are less likely to self-refer to psychological talking therapies and are less likely to be referred to such services by GPs. So, these are little things that happen where it's easy to medicate, chuck him in a secure space, rather than kind of like sitting down, talking, unpacking, learning, taking time, taking care, trying to get culturally sensitive services to actually help heal. So it's an interesting report. I haven't finished it yet. I've only been able to scan the first few pages, but it's important to know these things.
Yes, so we have 2 comments from Learn to Dig 2 Pits. First one is peace and love.
Peace and love to you too. Thank you.
And the second one is nothing's changed. They still hate you.
That's what we call a slam dunk, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't true, but it is. It is what it is. Let me move to the next section. And this one is looking at UK policing matters. For those of you who have just joined us, you're watching Legality's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are watching live, then you are welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, just like our other guests have. It's good to have you all with us. And don't forget to subscribe, like, share if you find the broadcast useful. Now, as I said, we're going to go to some policing-related issues. And this is basically covering stuff that's affected us over the last couple of weeks in the UK. So the first story is that of the father of 2, Mikias Tekesti, who left Ethiopia to seek asylum in the UK and was granted refugee status. Sadly, he became homeless after losing his job. And now we know that in July last year, he died in custody after being arrested in Croydon town centre on recall to prison and for suspicion of possession with intent to supply drugs. Now, why he was arrested is immaterial here. That's not the point. The point was that he was placed in custody, and the two Metropolitan Police officers who were with him, who travelled in a van with him, didn't. Well, it looks like they didn't take care with him and look after his health. And so now they're under criminal investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And they're being investigated for the potential offence of gross negligence, manslaughter. I know the odds of them being found guilty is very slim. There's never much sympathy from institutional bodies that are aligned to the police when someone has been any kind of like history with the criminal justice system. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve justice. He doesn't deserve a thorough investigation to make sure that actually they did follow, and they gave him. They had a duty of care towards him, and that they followed those guidelines. Because if he died because of their negligence, because that they were being racist to him, I don't know. I'm just saying, if they did, then they should be found guilty and they should be dismissed from the force. But it's tragic when this happens. There's a quote from his best friend, fellow rough sleeper, Louise Kirby, and she said, "It was horrible. You lose a friend. It's a homeless guy, so no one really cares. No one gives a damn. People are against us all the time. He was just another statistic. He was just another drug user that could go away. If we die tomorrow, they don't care." We'll keep our eye out for this one. But again, like I said, whenever it's someone who's had a history with the criminal justice system, there's a lack of sympathy in the media. There's a lack of sympathy even within our own community by some people. But that's not the point. The point was that, when he came, from Ethiopia seeking asylum, he was working. He had a job, he had a home. And it's only when, he lost his job and he couldn't afford his rent and he became homeless that the spiral took him down this route. I'm going to leave it there. The next story is what we call is in reference to what we call a code case, and this is a deeply irritating story where we just found out that the family of Kelso Cochrane, I don't know if you remember Kelso Cochrane, is the young dapper, the young man in the image on the far left. He was an aspiring lawyer from Antigua, age 32, was stabbed to death by a European youth in Notting Hill, as in West London, many years ago. In fact, 1959 to be precise. Now, his family have been trying to get access to the police files because his killing is still marked as unsolved, and they've been told that they can't have them. Now, the reason why they want the footage, why they want the case, is because not only it's not just a case that no one's been charged, but there was a BBC documentary, and that was made about this. And the maker of the documentary, Mark Oldham, wrote a book called Murdering Notting Hill. And in his book, he claimed that the 20-year-old Patrick Digby, and that's the character on the far right, had confessed to being the killer to a group of friends. Now, he makes some comment like, "They're never going to catch me, never." And so, this comment's in the book. But what's happened is that he passed away in 2007 from a heart attack. So if he is the killer, if he is the murderer, he's escaped justice. So, Kelso Cochrane's brother, Stanley, the image in the middle, actually, he called for a cold case review in 2003. He was really angry that his brother's clothes had been destroyed, so that it was all the forensic evidence had been gone. So he just wants the paperwork, but the family have been told by the National Archives that they can't have the documents, as the Metropolitan Police say the case is still open. And so they're told that he's going to have to wait to 2054. That's 2054 before they'll give them the casework. No one is looking into this case. The only people looking into this case now are the family. I don't know if the police interviewed this Patrick Digby before he died. I don't know whether they searched, because it was alleged that the murder weapon was hidden under the floorboards in Digby's home. I don't know if they did that. But like I said, this is why it's an irritating story, and it's one of those things that doesn't get a lot of media coverage, because it's only an African who died, right? It was so long ago. Who cares? What does it matter? But we know that it matters. We know that we have that saying in our community. It's a Pan-African saying: the passage of time does not lessen the crime. It doesn't matter how long ago it took place. Justice is justice, and we have to keep passing on the baton until we find the truth. And even if Patrick Digby, died without facing a court and having to call for it, the family has a right to know. We as a community have a right to know. Kelso Cochrane has a right, his whole family, us, to rest in eternal peace, knowing that his murderer faced justice. I'm going to move on to the next story. Sister Oleander.
Okay, so we have from Keith Hall. He says that man deserves justice.
He does.
And sorry. And Learn to Dig to Pitt says the father of Notting Hill Carnival.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't involved in the making, but it was his death and deaths around that era that led to Claudia Jones, Ronnie Lissette, all coming together and actually starting the carnival. I mean, we know about it taking place in St. Pancras and then moving onto the streets of Notting Hill and kind of like trying to heal. I mean, they used to have what they called N-word hunting taking place at that time. I spoke about, just in this week's program, I've spoken about a couple of deaths now with Roland Adams, Stephen Lawrence, where you have gangs of youth running around, like racists and, basically lynching Africans on the streets of the UK. This took place during Kelso Cochrane's time as well. And so the carnival was a way to push back against that, to unite the working class, to unite Africans and Europeans who didn't want to kind of like live with kind of like this hatred that the political elite were trying to manipulate, as they're doing now with their anti-migrant rhetoric. So thank you for sharing those comments. He does deserve justice. Okay, the next story probably talks about where do we hope to get that justice from. Now, you've probably heard for a long time that, if you want the police to change, then you need to join it. You've got to be in it to win it. That's what they say with the lottery. That's what they say with transforming the police, everything like that. Well, once again, we're having a call from the National Black Police Association for a boycott from people from minority ethnic communities to join in the Metropolitan Police. They're saying, look, the police is still racist, and they're engaged in a vexatious misconduct investigation into a leading officer. We can't in good consciousness say to anyone to join the police while it still has that character. Now, what they're referring to is Inspector Charles Ehikeyoya. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's the chair of the Metropolitan Black Police Association. And he says he's been targeted because he voiced concerns about the poor behavior of senior officers and the racism he and his colleagues has suffered. So the MBPA have claimed that he was racially abused in a WhatsApp group. And instead of treating him as a victim, there have been a deliberate and concerted effort to find dubious evidence against him. And we're quite familiar with that. I think they did that with Brother Leroy Logan. When someone who's working against racism in the police, you have police officers who then try and dig up all kinds of dirt, trying to manufacture kind of like false claims to get them out. We know this is not just limited to abuse of African people, because within the last week or so, Amina Ahmed, who's a senior Muslim Met staffer, also resigned from the police, saying that her complaints about racism, misogyny, and sexual assault, and that has been initially committed by her colleagues, has been systematically ignored. So, the police might be doing some good work in rooting out all of those corrupt officers that was on their radar. But, we can see that structurally there's still a lot of work to do. And the fact that the National Black Police Association, the NBPA, are saying do not join and we're here, we're in here. Do not join us. It's still racist. That's damning as far as I'm concerned to the police, and they need to fix up, sort their act out. An example why they need to fix up and sort their act out is a story about the young boy who has been stopped and searched 6 times in 5 months. Now, the good thing is that there's 8 Metropolitan Police officers who are facing an investigation from the IRPC about this, because this 16-year-old, this teenager who was stopped 6 times across Tottenham and Stratford have just said enough is enough. And thankfully, they lodged a complaint. They went through the Haringey Independent Stop and Search Monitoring Group. And, they say that he's been racially profiled, that they've been using insufficient grounds for stop and searches, that force was unreasonably used, that the officers failed to consider the boy's welfare, and policing procedures were not even followed consistently. So there's a whole litany of complaints against the officers. The IOPC has said that at least 4 of the searches involved officers from the Territorial Support Squad, the TSGs. Some people call them the riot squad, the bully vans, the pigs. SPG back in my day they used to be called. They've been given various grounds for searches, saying that in the suspicion of drugs or theft, or that he matches the description of people carrying out robberies and knife crime in the area, all that kind of nonsense that they always do. They're basically racially profiling and stuff like that. But the IOPC, to its credit, has said that they've examined the body-worn camera footage and they've identified evidence that indicates that there's been some potential breaches of police standards. So I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if the police, because I'm not one of those people who has confidence in IOPC. I recognize that they've been improving their action, but we also on this program has shared stories about officers from the IOPC who've been hounded out of the IOPC, investigators who come from our community, because they've been highlighting racist cases that have been explosive and that needed scrutiny, and they didn't have the guts and the courage to see it through to the end. But this is promising. We'll see what happens. And I wanted to share that image there on the screen for you, just so you've got an idea of what it looks like when you have a teenager surrounded by around 8 officers, and how terrifying, how intimidating, how traumatic that experience is. And these are not the SPG, well, they don't call it SPG anymore, the Territorial Support Group officers. These are like just your regular like PCs. Those who come out of those Territorial Support Groups, TSG ones, they're often wearing this kind of like these helmets and pumped up body armor and stuff like that. 16-year-old boy, that could be your child, that could be your nephew, that could be your niece. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Let me move on to the next story. And this one is...
so we have 2 comments. That's definitely targeted. That's from Keith Hall. And he also says, yes, SPG vans, I remember them well. And I think those are, I don't know, swearing faces, something like that.
Angry faces, because I remember SPG fans as a young boy. In fact, they were one of the things that catalyzed me into being an activist. They're the things that pushed me towards it, because at that stage of my life, when I was quite young, I actually wanted to be a detective. I wanted to catch bad people. I didn't want to be a PC officer. I didn't want to pound the street. I just wanted to catch really bad people and get them away from everyone else. And what happened, I mean, some of my friends know this. What happened was that, I was in the music industry at that stage. I was, doing my thing, and, kept on just getting stopped and searched, kept on getting, fights in the police. They kept on harassing, banging us up against the vans. It was just awful. And SPG vans would chase us down the streets, done absolutely nothing wrong. And I just came to a conclusion as a young teen, I suppose, that I can't join the police, because the police are the bad people. Who am I going to detect? It's like life on Mars. It's like, you start to realize that actually, and hence the only route to actually help people now is to become an activist or to find other ways of doing it. But I can't do that inside the police. I know obviously there are some officers who work in the police, and they do some really good work. But that traumatized experience with the SPG vans and fake statements, colluding officers, the violence. I can't tell you about the violence I've experienced at the hand of the police. I mean, I'm not going to, I've given some back, but I mean, only in self-defense. Yeah. Anyway, see, SPG vans brings back awful memories, let alone friends who have been seriously injured and elders, if who have been who've been injured. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I'm not even talking about 1980, 85. I'm not talking about those days. Let me move on. Thank you, Sister Oleander. Was there another story, or shall I move on? Okay, so this is the story of. Let me just move there. This is really a reminder of the complexity of our community and what happens when policing fails. I mean, I gave an example of why the police don't have me as a detective, and I'm happy for that. But the person, the character's name is Sosa Henkoma. He was 9 years old when he's recruited to deliver packages for a violent gang. Now, it's very easy just to sign off our young people who get caught up in county lines, who get caught up in the life of crime. I mean, Sosa was trapped in a life of crime for over 10 years. I mean, during those 10 years, he was stabbed at least 11 times and shot twice. But he ran guns, he ran drugs between London and Liverpool. He was a child, engaged in the world of criminality. And it was only when he was caught, he was convicted and jailed, that the authorities deemed him to be a victim. They recognized that actually a 9-year-old boy recruited into this life isn't a thug, but they're a victim. These are safeguarding issues. Since then, there's a positive in this particular story that he's undergone intensive therapy. He's dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder, all kinds of trauma. He's actually studying for a degree in criminology and sociology. And part of his way of giving back is that he works with anti-trafficking charities. He mentors at-risk young people because he recognizes them. He does that while training in the NHS, the police and social workers on how to work with victims and young people at risk from child criminal exploitation. But if he'd been seen at 9 years old, had been seen as a victim, as a child whose life was being robbed, who needed help rather than being criminalized at such a young age. We talk about adultification. Then he wouldn't have had to have gone through that. And it's really important, the story just came out last week, so it's relevant to share it now, but it's just important to recognize how easy, there for the grace of I, we don't know what can happen. And as long as stereotyping takes place, as long as the police abuse that power, and as long as the systems protect corrupt police officers, then there are those within our community as well as outside it that will exploit young people. So I want to leave that one there and move to the next section. For those of you who are joining us, you're running a bit late. We're almost finished. This is our last section. You're watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. We are live and you can interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed to us. You can also like those little like things, find one of those little icons that bubble up the screen and stuff like that. That always puts a smile on my face. And also share this. It's really important to share as well. So each one teach one. If you think there's someone who would benefit from watching this, just an update on what's taking place within our community over the last 2 weeks. This is 2 weeks, right? And share this. Put it in your WhatsApp. You can link us. You don't need to link us. I don't really particularly care. I just want as many of our people to be aware of what's going on and be conscious of these issues. Now, this closing section looks at some of the positive news relating to our community over the past 2 weeks. And I'm going to start with this story, which is about a naming of a library to the amazing Una Marston. Now, this took place in the Aylesbury area, and the library was opened by Southwark Council as part of their redevelopment program. When I say redevelopment, is a byword for gentrification. But the news about the library being opened is a positive story, because even though the housing estate has gone, and that's a tragedy. It's outside the scope of this program to go into what took place and the fight to save the Aylesbury estates. But if we look at the story of Una Marston, many of us who are unfamiliar with her, she was a poet, a playwright, a journalist. She was a radio producer. If you saw this story on BBC London, they'll be saying that she was the first, African heritage radio producer, which she may have been at the BBC, but she was much more than that. They narrowed that down to a radio producer. She was so much more. She was also an anti-colonial activist. So she wasn't just dealing with decolonizing, she was dealing with anti-colonial struggles. Now, she arrived from Jamaica to the UK in 1932. She first stayed in Peckham with the Pan-Africanist Dr. Harold Moody. That name should be familiar to all of you who are watching this. She became a secretary for the League of Coloured People. That was the name of the organisation at the time. It was an amazing Pan-African organisation. If you think about the National Association for Coloured People in America, this was a much more progressive version of that in the UK. Her profile increased after being hired on the BBC Empire Service in 1941 for a radio program called Calling the West Indies. Cringe. I hate saying that. We know it's not West Indies. We know Columbus got lost. And so it's called West of India, West Indies. But actually, no. I mean, but that's what the program was called. But she used that program. She used that profile to really reach out to people. I think she spoke to Derek Walcott. I mean, she was just an amazing activist. And there's certainly much more that she did. I think there's an image of the journal that she helped produce. She was clearly a Pan-Africanist, clearly an activist. But unfortunately, back in those times, the racism, was off the hook. I mean, when I say off the hook, this was before Kelso Cochrane. And it affected her mental health. Her mental and physical health came under severe pressure. And she started to suffer from schizophrenia. I mean, it was just that bad. In the end, she returned to Jamaica. I think the BBC actually helped cover the cost, which, it's the fact that she couldn't follow her dream and keep helping. Once she got back to Jamaica, as usually happens, once we leave the space that's causing us the mental disorder and the mental stress, she started to come into herself again. She set up her own publishing company and sadly passed away in 1965. So that's the legacy of the Una Marston Library. If you are in the Aylesbury area, check it out. Or if you're not, just read a little bit about her. We have so many people who have made so many contributions to our history that we are unfamiliar with. We're often narrowed it down to kind of like a few icons, often not even from the UK, but normally from the Americas. But we have people who have come from all over the world and made an amazing difference, so that we can, and I can actually just talk to you today. Another piece of good news I'm going to share with you is, one about this young chef called Famara Kurang. I don't watch MasterChef, so I'm not going to even try and pretend I know what on earth he had to do. But I do know that he won. He was named winner of Young MasterChef. And what he did was he dedicated his success to his family. And that's the kind of thing that we like to hear. He used traditional recipes. He made a meal which was a dish that originally came from Senegal. And but what I liked was that, not only did he win, but he actually acknowledged where it came from and the importance, and how his success couldn't have happened without them. And so we're not only just bigging him up for being a young 22-year-old winning this program, but also for being a grounded young 22-year-old who recognizes that we are a product of our family, of our community, of our ancestors. We are but a chain, a link in a chain. And I love that. Let me move on.
I've just got a couple. Cosmic Jedi says, "Greetings, family."
Greetings, Cosmic Jedi. Good to have
And
you.
Yeah, and FBcom says, I'm glad you shared this. I wanted to study activist voices. I was listening to an interview by Amanda Seals last night, and she was speaking about the depression she's suffering and her pain.
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for making that point. And yeah, it's something that's not discussed enough. That when you do engage in activist work, the stress, the burnout is real, and many activists tend to. In fact, I remember, let me sideway, because not even just activists. It's clear, and most people will know that there's a link between the prevalence of schizophrenia and bipolar in our community compared to other ethnic groups. And one of the things that researchers found out is that wherever there is intense racism, wherever we are isolated and made to feel othered, then we are more vulnerable and more prone to these kind of illnesses. Now, often when we think about mental health illnesses, we think, oh, it's just something that's in the head. Sometimes you think you can just medicate your way out of it, or you can lock someone up. This will solve it, and it doesn't. Obviously, that clearly that's just a bad approach. But and I think one of the early news articles revealed when it talked about therapies is that it also impacts us physically. And so we do become stressed, we do become ill, our life expectancy is shortened. And so being an activist is spiritually rewarding, and it's and we can talk about some of these people with reverence, but the impact it has on those engaged in it, their family, their friends, is immense. And it's not costed, it's not accounted for. People just take it for granted. So, I mean, I'm glad you're doing that work, and please keep studying. If anything I can do to help, I'd love to. We need to document this, because often what's happening is that the work of many is often falling onto the shoulders of too few, and that's unsustainable. It always has been unsustainable.
Okay, so and lastly, FPCom says, so I wanted to study and understand how we can help voices in this space.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's not surprising that you would be thinking about that and doing something in that way. And I think just sometimes the best thing for someone who's working hard for their community and and um, and facing challenges in doing so, sometimes the best thing is just to be heard. Sometimes it's just to know that that what you're doing has meaning, it has value, because we live in a society. It's one of the byproducts of capitalism, that it makes us think in individualistic ways. So we tend to think about me and I, whereas we all come from communities that are we-centered, that are communal. We're, compounds. People talk about the village, and it takes a village, but they don't really sometimes understand it. It's not just a romantic phrase. It's real. A lot of us were raised by our grandparents. A lot of us were having to deal with challenges of uncles looking after us, or my uncle, like I said, when my father came over, he had to raise 2 children by himself, and that was really unheard of. So I think just being listened to and sharing those stories and giving support, that's what we can do. But I'll move on, and thank you for that. I mean, it does make me think that we need an organized program in our community to do this. But this story here is an interesting one. Those of you know that I'm not really into finance, I'm an anti-capitalist, but it's an important story, and I thank our researchers for raising it. This one is a story about Nigerians in the diaspora are planning to float 100 billion naira venture capital fund. And when I say they're based in diaspora, they're from the US, they're from Canada, from the Caribbean, from across Europe, across South Africa. And this 100 billion naira venture capital fund is designed really to support small, medium enterprises who are doing work that's linked to Nigeria. They're also looking to create a specialized bank. Now, I mean, I'm not a finance person, and I did put this in the positive news section because I think that actually this is the right way of thinking, that we need to find our money and pull it together to support ourselves and our industries. And I kind of like that thinking. I won't pretend it's completely altruistic. From what I can see from the article that shared this, it's the result of reforms being introduced by the Nigerian federal government to address the critical need for more foreign direct investment to stimulate domestic production in the country. And so what we're seeing is that many of our home countries, where our ancestry hails from, are not doing well when it comes to domestic production. And so they're recognizing that those of us out in the diaspora have something to contribute. In fact, if you think about diaspora remittances, well, every year they're growing, and this year they're expected to grow to some 20 billion. So 20 billion, that's $20 billion, I should say. So it's around what, 15 million pounds. But if you think that we are spending that much money and sending it back to our families, wherever they reside, we can help. We have something to help. And so I think this is a good news story. I'm not an economist and I'm not really a capitalist, but I do know that this is what's needed. I'd rather go to a bank which is financed by a collection of Africans from across the world looking for small and medium enterprises than I'd go to one of these Western banks, which well, we know where they get their money from and where they extract their money from, and how they don't have any interest in the development of our peoples. Let me move on. Sister Oleander.
Yep. So we have 2 comments from Cosmic Jedi. It takes a village. It's something we lived with for eons before we counted that term /truth. I don't feel we made it to sound great or poetic.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think sometimes it's used as a cliche without actually thinking about how important it is and what it really means, because it's a reflection of our cultural practices, of our cultural ideas. It's a beautiful Pan-African expression for a real expression. It's real. It's not supposed to be just a platitude that you just say.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
And lastly, he says, coined, sorry, not counted.
Yes, I get that. Yes, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, it does take a village, and and we all here are trying to do that. Thank you. Okay, this is a really nice project that I just heard about. This one is the Reframe project. It's been running for a little while, actually. There's a shortage of photography showing medical conditions on African and other darker skin tones. And so this project, led by UWE, that's University of Bristol, funded by NHS England, is doing a really simple initiative where they're just taking photographs of conditions on people with a wide range of skin tones, just to make sure that there's a diverse photo library available that people can use, like clinicians, educators, the public, when talking about particular issues. And this is really important, because if you don't have images, you don't recognize yourself in those images, then you can actually misdiagnose, or you can actually miss problems. And so the group behind Reframe, they're saying that they hope that the comprehensive new image library, which will be hosted on the NHS England website, will reduce health inequalities by lowering the possibility of mixed diagnosis that can occur in cases where conditions present differently on darker skin compared with lighter skin. Just things like meningitis, for example. So it's a really simple initiative. It's a brilliant initiative. I think it's still running. So I think you can contact the NHS if you want to get involved. But just even things like I think we spoke about this last year. See maternity images of babies who are African inside the womb, just to help when you're being trained. This is a really simple project which actually starts to make a change across the board. So it's a positive story. The next story is, this is a nice one. This is, there's quite a few. This one is the Andrew Levi Scholarship. There's not much to say really about it. It's just been announced. The University of Edinburgh is offering scholarships to support African, and in particular, people of Caribbean heritage who are from socially economically deprived backgrounds. And it's just, it's a scholarship that's been made possible by a gift from the family of the late Andrew Levi. You probably know from a book, Small Islands and stuff, but it's simple. There's not much more to say than that. That if you are from you know, a background, and you're not, you know, working class background. I don't even like those terms, working class and middle class and stuff like that. But you know, socially economically deprived also sounds well. If you ain't got a lot of cash, if you're from an impoverished background, I mean, it's you know, all these terms, is, you know, they're jargon, but it just means if you're from a poor background, and particularly if you've got Caribbean heritage, um, you know, but it does support those without. So if you're an African without Caribbean heritage, it does support that. Then feel free to apply. The University of Edinburgh is doing this. There are other scholarships. I'm going to try and find out more, and I won't be sharing them all constantly, but I mean, if I can, I will. But this is an undergraduate program, so I think they pay the fee, but your tuition fees, and they also give you a stipend so you can live on as well. And so, you know, it's a good opportunity, and I love hearing of those who have done well selling our tales and our history and our culture, and have been able to live comfortable off it, passing it forward and helping others. This is the right thing. You know, Stormzy was the one that you heard a lot about this, but we need much more of us doing this. I do know some footballers do this as well. We did have quite a few stories from the world of sport, but it would have made the program so long. So I had to make a judgment call on that. Okay. Sister Oleander.
Yes, so we have from Keith Hall. That's such a simple yet great idea with the photos. So that's the one before this one.
Yeah, it is, right? It is.
Yeah. And then Cosmic Jedi says, I apologize for any future spelling and grammatical errors in advance. Also, have you both seen the Book of Clarence yet? I'm curious on your thoughts about it.
No, I'm not familiar with the Book of Clarence, and you never need to apologize for spelling and grammar. That's no worries. But the Book of Clarence, no. It'd be interesting to hear a bit more. I mean, we're on the penultimate slide. So I mean, if there's time, you can say something about what it's about. But no, I haven't. But I'll look into it straight after. Well, not immediately straight after, but I'll look after the program. What we did see actually, Oleander, we did go and see American Fiction, and God, I just realised we don't have the culture spot in this program. We used to have it on the Ansapo, the radio station. We do reviews of films and plays and stuff. I mean, it'd be great to do that, but it'd make the program too long. Interesting film. I'd hope it'd be much better. But it was an interesting film, important topic. But I wish I hadn't seen it in the cinema. That's all I'm going to say. But it's an interesting topic. But I'll leave it there.
Okay, and lastly, FB Comms is laughing. I think that's when you were. Oh, that was funny. What? Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure what the laughing's for. Is that with me?
Oh, when you when you were oh gosh, what were you talking about? I can't remember what you're talking about. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It's fine. It was funny.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I've been smart to everyone's faces as well. That's always a good thing. And talking about being smart to everyone's faces, the last slide I'm going to go to is our biannual open classroom event. And this is a plug, self-promotion, blah, 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 blah. I'll even asking for a few more seconds so you can actually get the registration link and type it up. But of course, this will be on YouTube if you want to type it up and register to come. So for those who don't know, every year I do a couple of open classroom events. I'm a lecturer at University College London. I'm an anthropologist, and I invite my students to meet with our community, and we just really talk about how we can rethink anthropology as a discipline. It's a session that's for anyone interested in experiential learning, participatory research, or scholar activism. If you're wanting to learn how to start co-designing and collaborating on ethnographic projects designed to address real world problems, then this is for you, really. I mean, I'll be there. It's on the 8th of March this year, taking place between 2 to 5 p.m. This year, I think this will be the only one because I'm taking a sabbatical this year. So the one that would normally happen in October won't be taking place because I'll be offline for that part of the year. So you're welcome to attend. It takes place at the IDPAD Empowerment Centre, which is in Hackney. It's on Lower Clapton Road. Runs from 2 to 5. The doors will open 1:30 for prompt start. If you're interested, please register. I'll put the screen up again. That's the registration. Just go to forms.office.com blah 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 blah. Type that in, register, let us know. And let's, I am in teacher mode there. But after the session we can discuss, and it finishes at 5, so we can kind of like play around with different ideas and stuff. I mean, we'll probably stay to at least 6. So you are welcome. Plug 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 plug. Thank you for being with us. I think that's the last slide. No, oh god, that's right. I was going to do this madness. This is the penultimate slide. Oh god, we've run out. This program's taking a little longer than I thought. I did say I was going to do this, didn't I? But perhaps I won't do this when we've got too many slides. All right, so this is my equivalent of Jerry Springer's. What did they used to call it? Jerry's Corner or some nonsense like that. The opinion space. Okay, so what am I going to say? Okay, I'll try and keep it brief. Beware false prophets bearing gifts. This year is going to be a mega election year. There's going to be elections in November for the UK, elections in the US with the orange one returning, got elections across the EU. It's just elections. And because there's this mega focus on democratic processes, we're going to be bombarded with messages from the left and the right, the fox and the wolf, as Malcolm would refer to them. Now, we know that in this country that they are the same. There's no difference between the two, the left and the right. I mean, it's just different types of poison. Some kill you fast, some kill you slower. And I'll give you an example. It's like, you can see the Labour's Race Equality Act, which this tweet went out in 2022, and that came straight after the Creed report, which came out in 2021. And the Creed report is the one that the government put together, which the Boris Alexander Johnson, the Prime Minister then, commissioned this report, and it concluded that there's no more racism in the UK, that slavery was an experience, and blah 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 blah. So I'm just saying right now, be careful. It's like you're going to be guilt tripped into the whole, our ancestors died so you can vote, blah blah blah. You're going to hear all of that sort of stuff. Be careful, be mindful. What you need to remember is that, if you decide to vote, I don't vote in general elections. I only vote for people that I believe in. I vote often in those local ones if I know the person I'm voting for, which is often the case. But I tend not to vote for political parties I don't believe in. So, if I want to vote, I'll probably, and it's the Greens, and I vote for the Greens or whatever. But, this is the thing I'm trying to say here. It's up to you how you vote, and I'm not here to tell you how to vote. What I am here to tell you, however, is that anyone who can remain silent over the massacre of innocent children, and those children are being labeled as terrorists, does not deserve your support. All right? We are seeing these people for exactly what they are right now. And if both parties can stay silent and provide arms to murder people. I saw something on the news the other day about what was it? It was a 6-year-old girl who had been murdered. Okay, and they won't say anything about it. They won't call for a ceasefire. Those people do not deserve our support. Right now, they're talking about bringing back national conscription so that our children would join the army by force. They're even talking about raising the pension age up to 71. Those people do not deserve our support. So I'm not going to make this a long thing. I'm going to say, just beware, divide and rule by skin folk who ain't kinfolk. That's really important. You've got to remember, Kemi Badenoch, she knew about Horizon. She knew about that post office thing. But yet when she went over to talk to Fujitsu, she was just interested in money. You've got to remember that Kwasi Kwarteng, he sexed up the architect of the Windrush scandal. Those are skin folk who ain't kinfolk. I could even go into Lamy. I can go into all of them. So just be aware, just have that third eye open. I'm not saying be ignorant, because there's too many in our community who are politically ignorant. I'm sorry, but a lot of us are politically, kind of like illiterate. We don't really understand how a political system runs. And maybe that's something that's my responsibility as an educator. I should do classes on political literacy. I don't know. I try, but we need more political literacy. A lot of our people get our news from social media, and we don't know how it all works, especially when we need to know and it's related to us. But this year we're going to be bombarded left, right. We're going to have social media, we're going to have AI technology, we're going to have memes. And I'm just saying, keep your eye open and don't be forced into any direction. Do what your heart tells you, follow spirit. Don't be passive. Because my thing is that if you ain't voting, then you best be working for our community all the other times. I work throughout the year. I don't just wait once every 5 years to be politically active. So if that's all you can do, then go ahead and do it. And I'm no judgment. We all have our lives, but if you ain't voting, then you've got to find other ways to help it. But just don't be corralled into this nonsense. Yeah, and don't be fooled by the optics, the illusion of inclusion. Just because they look like us, they ain't kinfolk. So that's my opinion. That's my Toyin's corner or something. Just Oleander.
Okay, so we have 5 comments. The first one is Cosmic Jedi. I saw it today and found certain things interesting, despite some obvious bad scenes that fell out of place. I believe he's talking about the what's it called, Book of Clarence. That's what he was talking about earlier.
Okay.
And then Keith Hall says, blessings to you both for an informative and interesting conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Cosmic Jedi says, please mention the movie title you said you saw recently. I think that's American Fiction.
Yeah, American Fiction. I think is it Jeffrey Wright? It's just based on an African writer who wants to write things that are interesting, but they're not selling. And so, that same thing, you start writing things that are kind of like ghetto, and then it gets a lot of success. And then just the tensions about, do you need to kind of like dumb down what you do to get success and what it means? And it's a really interesting discussion and topic. It's just that, for me personally, the way the film was, the way it wasn't written for us to watch. It was written for different
and like I said when we saw it, I'm fed up of being the butt of the joke. So.
Yeah, there's some scenes where that it doesn't matter how important the point is, we are the butt of the joke. Yeah. And so everyone around you is laughing, but you're just sitting there like, why? That's not funny. They're laughing at our misery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That happens too many times in that film. The arguments are important, but I don't want to be sick. I'd rather watch that at home in my own privacy.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Keith Hall says, I totally agree with your political stance. I think that's PSPS or PSPS. I'm not sure. And then Cosmic Jedi, lastly, this is the last one, says they call others terrorists to keep focusing away from them and their constant terrorism daily, globally, from food, money, health, and so much more. They are the true terrorists.
Well, white supremacy has been a long enduring terrorist system that has terrorized the world and continues to do so through nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And the economic structures, the destruction of the planet. I mean, all the things that it does, and the wars that it manufactures and keeps going. So just be mindful. If you're going to vote, just be mindful.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sister Oleander. Let me just put up the last slide. So, yes, where are we? There we go. Okay, last slide. Thank you. We will be back on Sunday, the 25th of February. We'll be at the earlier time, I think, of around 5 p.m. It's a one-off because I think we have an appointment, so we can't make the 7 o'clock. So we'll try and run at 5 o'clock. So remember, Sunday the 25th, 2 weeks' time, earlier time of 5 o'clock. But that means we have to be really strict in making sure that we get the program done in an hour, so we can get to the place we've got to go to. I want to thank you all for watching, listening. Thank you, Brother Colin Research, and everyone else involved. Our community. It's a blessing and it's a privilege to have you with us and to share this journey with us and to give that feedback and educate us as we are trying to share information. I can't express how much I appreciate that as well. Sister Oleander, do you want to say anything to close up?
No, just to say, as usual, walk good, and I hope everybody's well. And yeah, just take care and watch out for evildoers.
Yeah, definitely. And as ever, we'll see in a couple of weeks. And may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe.